The US is done being taken advantage of by the world, and now it is ready to take matter in its own hands and ready to bend others to its will. And the biggest target in its line of sight is China. Most of the people think that the US wields the power to make China do anything that it wants. And so most of the people think that China will eventually give up their efforts and do whatever the US wants them to do. And this is where most people go wrong, because they don't understand the fundamental state of things in both of these countries, which has given China the advantage over the US. And so in today's video, I'm going to tell you why is that the case and what is in it for both the countries. Let's get started. Just before we get started, I just want to say a huge thank you to every one of you for making me reach 1,000 subscribers. The reel that I made on Donald Trump went completely viral and I think it is still blowing up. And so by the time this video comes out, I think we'll probably even be about 2,000 subscribers. But yes, I really appreciate it and thank you very much for all the support. To understand how China has an upper hand over here, we first need to understand how things are in the US. A few days ago, the US announced that it was going to delay reciprocal tariffs on all non-retaliatory countries by 90 days. And obviously China was excluded from this delay. But just a few days later, the US again announced that it was going to delay smartphones, laptops and any chip making equipment from any sort of reciprocal tariffs. And this means all of a sudden, the US excluded $100 billion worth of Chinese goods from any sort of reciprocal tariffs. So tell me, why did Donald Trump take back the tariffs that he was hell-bent on not taking back? Is it because his own portfolio went into deep red and so he wanted to see some profit again? Or was it because some high-profile individual came begging into his office to do so? No, it is none of that. It is actually the bond market that forced Trump to take back his tariffs. Don't believe me? Just watch ahead. This is a chart of the 10-year bond yield. As you can see, after Trump announced reciprocal tariffs on 2nd April, bond yields fell for 2 days, which is fine. But right after that, bond yields shot up very sharply and went from 3.9% to 4.5% in just 3 trading sessions. And such a huge move in such a short time is very big. Because of this, the MOVE index, which measures the bond market volatility in the US, went from 106 all the way up to 140. Now, if the index goes above 150, that is where bad stuff starts to happen in the market. And so we'll get to that in just a second. But if you see, as soon as Trump announced a delay in tariffs, the index cooled off. Now, a question that might come up in your mind is, why does Trump care about the bond market? And you would know the answer to this question if you would know how the condition of the US banks is under the hood. But if you don't, it's alright. Basically, the US banks are sitting on hundreds of billions of dollars of losses on their government bond holdings. And if the yields go up, their losses go up too. Even a 0.1% rise in yields will increase the bank's losses by billions of dollars. And so if you want to read more about this topic in detail and understand things in more detail, I've already written an article on it which you can read through the link given in the description. And while you're here, consider subscribing me because there is a big update on this situation that you don't want to miss. But the point that I'm coming to is that if Trump lets the bond market loose and if things go out of hand, the whole situation won't take a long time to convert into a full-blown banking crisis. And this is because the financial institutions in the US are sitting on highly leveraged and highly concentrated bond holdings. And so if things go south against them, it won't take a long time for them to go bust. Now, Trump doesn't want this to happen. Because if in the current state of things a crisis occurs, it can very well dwarf even the global financial crisis of 2008. And be rest assured that if something like that happens, Trump and his party will be blamed for everything and they will suffer for years if not decades to come. So I hope you now understand how the bond market forced Trump to take back his tariffs. But how does China fit in all of this? China has the button that if pressed can cause this crisis, and that button says sell the US treasuries. You see, China has $750 billion worth of US treasuries with itself. And so if it decides to sell even $100 billion worth of US bonds at once, then it can create such a big supply in the market that it will send yields through the roof. And that will be equivalent of detonating a nuclear bomb right in the heart of the US financial market. This means that China has the power to hit US where it will hurt the most. And so if US decides to drag China through the dirt, China sure won't stay behind to flex its powers. Heck, the situation is so serious that the US Federal Reserve came out with a statement saying a few days ago that it is ready to support the bond market whenever needed. Well, if the US Federal Reserve can come in and support the bond market at any time, what's the problem? To understand that, we'll need to understand what the US Federal Reserve will do in order to support the bond market. Let's say China comes in and starts to sell its bonds. Well then, if the Federal Reserve needs to support the market, it will need to be a buyer of those bonds. If the Fed starts to buy bonds, it will need to print dollars to pay for them. And so by supporting the bond market, it will directly inject liquidity into the financial system. And that will bring inflation. Inflation will then push the bond yields higher, and now you can see how this becomes a loser's game either way for the US. So then what can the US do in this situation? The simple answer as to what the US can do in this situation is to increase the confidence in its bonds. And how can it do that? First of all, it will need to drastically reduce the fiscal deficit and the government debt that it has. And secondly, it will need to make the financial system robust by decreasing the leverage systematically throughout the whole financial system. This can be done through implementing various rules and regulations. But how can the US take care of its fiscal deficit and government debt? Now, there are many ways that the US can take over here to reduce its fiscal deficit and also the government debt, but honestly, it will take a whole another video to understand them properly. So hit the subscribe button for that one. What I'm getting to is that if the US does both of these things, the bond market fragility can reduce drastically, and then it will become much harder for China to hurt the bond market. The US is like a world-class fighter but with some severely broken ribs, and so every time it tries to attack China, China will just hit the US in the ribs and cause some severe pain. And so what the US needs to do over here is fix its broken ribs and then attack China if it wants to. There is also the possibility that the US might try to make peace with China, but given the current geopolitical landscape, it is a very unlikely outcome. But what is for sure is that, like the previous years, the certainty of times has gone away. And going forward in this roller coaster of a ride, try not to be very impatient with your actions. That is it for today, and if you like this video, please do consider subscribing to my channel for such no BS content in the future too. Anyways, I'll see you in another one. Bye bye.